We're gonna get started. Happy Giving Tuesday, everyone. This is our, I think, fourth annual Giving Tuesday event. Really thrilled to be with you today. We have lots of really great events planned from now until about 9:30. I want to update you before we get started on how we're doing with our fundraising goals. We had two specific goals. One is to surpass our funding goal, how much we raised last year. After the total event was closed around 9th or 10th of December, we raised $7,600. That was pretty amazing. So this year I'd like to beat that, and I can tell you right now we are about 38% of the way to that. We've just under, and maybe I had two more donations come in just now, so we may be up over the $3,000 mark, which is just amazing. We have two donation match incentives to tell you about. One of them is from our president, Kathy Wood. Kathy is donating $10 per international member donation, up to $250. So if you are a member residing outside of the U.S. and you are able to donate, Kathy's going to match that donation up to $250. So I hope that you will do that so she can pay. And then the second donation incentive match is me. Last couple of years I've donated $2,500 if we met $5,000 in donations, or I think the first 2 years it was $2,500. So since we're almost to $3,000 at at $5,000, I'm going to donate. I can't remember how much it was, but I'm going to do it per month. I'm going to set up a monthly donation of whatever equals out to $2,500 over the course of the next calendar year. So if you can help me do that, that would be awesome. I'm also going to cover the cost of shipping out all of these grab bags. So if you haven't gotten a grab bag yet, I encourage you to donate that $40 mark. You'll get 5 issues of the clarinet. From over the 53-year history of the organization. You also get some cool stickers and some swag items, and then we have some donated mouthpieces and barrels that we have been sent here that we really don't have anything better to do with because they're just sitting here, so we would like to give them back to you for your generosity. So please consider donating, share the links with your friends, family, and see how much we can raise this year for all of the different funds that we have. And I apologize, my dog wants to be involved as well. He's saying donate. So I am really excited to have Josh go here. He is one of the co-chairs of our Clarinet Enthusiast Committee. He's going to be walking us through a warm-up for the next few minutes. So if you have your clarinet handy, please pull that out. And I'm going to drop a link in the chat that shows you the PDF worksheet that Josh has prepared for this warm-up session. So thank you so much for being here, and thank you to Josh, and I will let him get started.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks so much for having me, Jessica. And it's always fun to get to share some nerdy clarinet ideas out there with the world. So for our warm-ups today, let me go ahead and pull up my screen here with them as well. And yes, Jessica just put the link in the chat as well, so you can get this downloaded. And it's also available on the website too. So for our warm-ups, my kind of warm-up philosophy is that really, no matter how difficult the music is that you're playing, from the perspective of the clarinet, there's really just kind of 3 core fundamentals that you need to take care of and attend to. One is producing the desired sound and getting the quality of sound you want. And I should add the caveat that even though there's 3 key fundamentals, they have their kind of branches in our umbrella categories. So unfortunately, it's not just 3 things that we have to think about. But the first big umbrella is producing the desired sound, including the volume and dynamic you want, good intonation, in addition to the quality and the timbre and all of those things that you're going for. Second big thing that you have to take care of on the clarinet is wiggling the fingers to the right place at the right time, because of course that's how we play different notes. And if you can do that in a relaxed and efficient manner, then you're going to be all the better off. And then big umbrella category number 3 is articulation and shaping the starts of the notes, the sustain of the notes, the ends of the notes, even the transitions between the notes. And that comes down to kind of the tongue motion. So we have the sound quality, the finger motion, and the tongue motion that are kind of the big 3 fundamentals. And again, that's true even if you're brand new to the instrument or you've been playing for years and years and years. Whatever music you're working on, that's what you have to get out of the clarinet. And for me, warm-ups are where we develop those skills and those fundamentals of the clarinet. I personally think that warm-ups are a misleading name for what we're actually doing when we're warming up. Yes, absolutely, there's some kind of getting the blood flowing and getting our body literally warmed up, but it goes so much beyond that, where warm-ups are really fundamentals exercises where we develop the fundamentals of the clarinet. So we'll go over a good 3-step warm-up so you can kind of follow along and get both warmed up, but also get some fundamentals being developed for you and building up your core fundamentals of the clarinet. So starting with long tones and sound quality, I strongly believe that if you can't sound great on just one note, then how can you ever expect to sound great when you're playing the Mozart concerto or, again, whatever piece you might be working on, even if it's just your band music? You're not going to sound great unless you can sound great on one note or very simple notes. When it comes to developing the sound quality, though, it's a balance of many, many variables, which can get a little bit tricky to know, like, what do I do with the embouchure? What do I do with the air? What do I do with the tongue position? And again, part of the point of the warm-ups is to develop those fundamentals, and I like to think about it as getting kind of calibrated to sounding really good and playing your best and balancing what the instrument needs. I was doing some research on this a few years ago and came across this really interesting idea that I kind of extrapolated into a fun little exercise that we'll do together. And this idea comes from Rayleigh's clarinet is what it's called, and it's actually a mathematic thing where Rayleigh was looking for stable oscillations, which is kind of counterintuitive because if you have something oscillating, how could it be stable? And the very quick overview of the conundrum was you have a spring that oscillates, but if you pull a spring and let it oscillate back and forth, eventually it'll come to rest. You can take a spring and kind of put a weight on it, and that'll make it bounce longer, but depending on the balance of the weight versus the spring, it'll either stretch out and stop springing, or again, the spring will kind of overpower it and it'll come to rest. So Rayleigh was thinking about, like, what is there that has this kind of stable oscillation, and came to the conclusion of music. And when we have sound vibrating, that's a stable oscillation. And he used a clarinet. I don't think it was a real clarinet. I think it was just a rough idea of a reed vibrating on a single reed instrument, but he called it Rayleigh's clarinet, and he uses that as a demonstration of this stable oscillation. And I think if we can kind of lean into the stability of the reed oscillation, we can find more consistency in our sound, more smooth transitions between large intervals. So this is one of my favorite exercises, just to kind of get warmed up and kind of feel out the reed vibrations for the day. So what we're going to do is play an open G, and we're going to kind of do what this chart is showing. So we're going to start with very, very little air support, and I can actually zoom in a little bit. Very little air support. We're going to gradually increase the air support, and as we do that, we're just going to get kind of that airy sound where we're not actually producing any real reed vibrations yet. But then we'll cross this kind of threshold, and the reed will start vibrating. It won't be a good sound. It'll be this kind of stuffy, airy, fuzzy sound. But then as we increase the air support, the reed vibrations are going to energize more, and we're going to find kind of this sweet spot where we have the maximum reed vibrations. And then we're going to keep pushing the air support further, and eventually that's going to kind of distort the sound and eventually even pinch off the reed vibrations, where just like the spring with the weight, we're overpowering the vibration of the reed and the springiness of the reed and causing it to completely pinch off. So this is what the exercise will sound like, and of course you're welcome to try it with me as well. You might want to listen first, and then I'll give you a second to try it on your own. And at the end, even when the sound had stopped, I didn't put my tongue on the reed, I didn't pinch off with my embouchure. That was just from blowing really, really hard and really intense air. So you could hear no sound, sound started, was fuzzy, sound became clear, distorted, then pinched off. So take a second to try that. I'll do it again as well, but feel free to try on your own. And you could hear right before it started distorting, we had this nice, full, rich, resonant sound. And that's what we're looking for. this type of exercise is one of my favorite exercises to do all the time, where we're basically very gradually panning from one extreme to the other. So we're starting with extremely low energy to the air support, and then gradually going to extremely forceful air support. And by doing that kind of gradual motion from one extreme to the other, you'll find the sweet spot in the middle where it sounds the best. The one caveat to that and the one trick is that you have to control the other variables as much as possible. For this exercise, it can be very easy to gradually increase the air or the embouchure support. And if you increase the embouchure support as you increase the air support, then you're changing the variables and won't quite find the sweet spot to the air support. But it's still a good exercise to experiment with and try to find that. And this is the air version of it. You can also do it with actually embouchure pressure intentionally, where you start with strong air and keep the air steady and then gradually add more embouchure support. I think I prepared like 45 minutes worth of material for a half an hour presentation, so we won't go into that right now. But as you're practicing and as you're doing your warm-ups, get creative and experiment and find those extremes. And if you go from one extreme to the other gradually, you'll find the right position in there somewhere. So for some long tones to actually play some different notes, these are the Christmas tree long tones, which were one of my favorites and one of the first long tone exercises where I actually understood the purpose of long tones to develop the sound quality. There's a whole bunch of different theories I've heard and ideas that I've had about why this is called Christmas tree. One of my favorites that's kind of fun is if you look at it sideways and then mirrored it, it would kind of be a Christmas tree shape where you start narrow and then expand out. Another one that I've heard that probably is a little more applicable is that the sound of the clarinet wants to be Christmas tree shaped, where the bottom is kind of spread and tubby, and then the top gets kind of thin and pinched off. So the point of the Christmas tree exercise is to kind of focus in those low notes and open up the high notes so that they sound nice and smooth and connected across the registers. So let's go ahead and play this. Normally for long tones, I truly pretend there's a fermata on every note and just move when you want. Since we're kind of trying to play this together, we'll go ahead and do it where I'll cue each note, and we'll say roughly 4 counts or so per note, but I want you to pay very close attention to kind of the variables of playing. How does your embouchure feel? How does the tongue position feel? How is the air flowing? Listen to the sound that you're making and maybe make some adjustments and reflect and explore and experiment. So we'll try this. We'll do it at about a mezzo forte dynamic, nice kind of middle of the road. I'll cue each notes, approximately 4 beats each. 1, 2, 3. Great, and I'm going to stop right there because this is also a very important thing to be doing in your warm-ups and in your practice in general. My first C started okay, not great, and then the C sharp was really stuffy and terrible. So if you hear anything that doesn't come out the way that you want, immediately stop and fix it, especially when you're in practice mode. Sometimes we might do things in performance mode where we have to get used to pushing through it, but all your warm-ups should be in really diligent practice mode where you're stopping and fixing things as they come up. So let's try it again, and I'll try to play better so I don't have to stop too much. But as you're going along with me, feel free to stop and fix things as you hear those opportunities for improvement. So trying from the beginning again, 2, 3. And I had a little finger blip in this C to B, and I debated about stopping there, but since we were close to the end, I figured we'd continue on through. As you're doing this, very, very important to be, again, really listening to what's coming out of the instrument, really being aware of what's going on kind of in your oral cavity and the air support and all of those good fundamentals. And then take a second to reflect on what you're doing. You can do this as you're going, kind of having that reflection of, okay, is this how I want to sound? Should I make any adjustments to the sound to make it better? But always be really deliberate about your practice. And this is actually the deliberate practice model. Is I like to think about it as do, reflect, plan. A lot of times people say plan, do, reflect, which is also good. It's all a loop that loops back on itself, so it doesn't really matter where you start. I'm too impatient to start with planning, and I just want to get in there and start doing. But you do the thing, reflect on it, and say, what did I like about that? What didn't I like about that? Where are the opportunities for improvement? Reflect deeply enough to get to the root of that issue, and then make a plan so that you can do it differently and make improvements to it. So take a second to reflect on what you just played. Think about if there's any of those opportunities for improvement, and see if you can turn those into a plan to make it better. For the sake of time, we won't do it again, but always be thinking about that and always be doing that deliberate practice. There's a few other great kind of practice techniques that I'm going to weave in here as well, so keep an ear out for all of those practice things. Going on to big opportunity for improvement number 2, the next big core fundamental is our technique and finger motion, which is wiggling the fingers to the right place and most importantly at the right time. I think timing precision is one of the most overlooked things when it comes to finger motion. A lot of times we're thinking about good hand position and keeping the fingers close to the keys is one that you've probably heard since you were playing clarinet in grade school and is a great advice and is an important thing to do. But I think sometimes we overly obsess about how our fingers are moving and forget to think about when our fingers are moving. And I think that's a really important thing to capture. So for all technique exercises, I strongly encourage doing it with a metronome 98% of the time or more that you're doing it, so that you're always having that good rhythmic precision. So we're going to do this stepwise motion scale. And I'm going to do it with the metronome at 72 beats per minute, which will hopefully be nice and comfortable. Focusing this first time through on being really relaxed and precise with the fingers and really precisely in time so that the rhythm is very even. So let's go ahead and try that. 1, 2, 3. I do want to say one thing about breathing real quick as well too. On the warm-ups, unless you're doing a warm-up where you're working on breath endurance and that's the fundamental that you're targeting, these aren't breath endurance exercises, and it's okay to breathe whenever you need to so that you can have a good supported sound. Do notice though, when I was doing the long tones, I was always breathing kind of in the middle of a note rather than between notes, because part of the point of the exercise is to practice a good transition between the notes. And if I was to breathe between the notes, either going up or down, then I wouldn't get to practice that transition. Whereas if I breathe in the middle of the note, then I'm still getting all of the transition. So be thoughtful about where you're breathing, but it's okay to breathe as much as you need to because it's not about air endurance. Unless you're doing an exercise about air endurance, then focus on that, of course. So that's the basic version of this, of just kind of playing straight through it. One thing when it comes to technique exercises in particular, but it absolutely happens with long tone and articulation exercises and all warm-ups that we do, is it becomes very tempting to just go through the motions on it and think, okay, warm-ups are just a thing that my teacher told me to play these exercises, or we always start with these in band, so I guess I'll start with some scales or long tones or things like that and just kind of play through them. And if you're thinking of warm-ups as warming up the body, then it's very easy to do that, and you do get the benefit of the body warming up by just going through the motions. but you can get so much more benefit from it by really engaging deeply with it through deliberate practice. Or the next thing that I'm going to talk about, which is contextual interference, is the fancy sciencey name for it. Basically, it just means mixing things up so that you have to think about it. And it's the desirable difficulty or the having to think about it that makes it valuable. So we're going to take this same pattern of notes, but we're going to mix it up a few ways, and we're going to do some contextual interference on it so that we can do it with more mental engagement so that it sticks in our long-term memory, grows our experience as a player more, so that we get better over time and establish those stronger fundamentals. So pick one of these rhythms. Don't try to play the whole line, although you could do that if you want a real challenge. But let's pick just the first measure. And what we're going to do is we're going to turn kind of each of these 3-note beats into this rhythm. So we're going to do long, short, short, long, short, short, long. And I'm still going to do it with the metronome, but just changing up the rhythm. So let's give that a try. 1, 2, 3. And if that's very easy for you, then try one of the other rhythms. These first 2 might be pretty easy. This third one will get a little harder. And then these last 3 will be quite challenging if you try playing it with those rhythms. For me, the rhythm was no problem, but I was getting a little desirable difficulty and a little contextual interference from the metronome, actually, which the metronome can also be a good tool for contextual interference and making you have to think about it a little bit. If you've ever had that experience of, oh yeah, I can play my scales just fine, but then in lessons, your teacher makes you do it with the metronome, or whenever you pull out the metronome, it falls apart and suddenly it's the hardest thing you've ever done. That's contextual interference. But if you lean into that difficulty and you work through that difficulty, then you'll get a ton of benefit out of it, and it's going to help you to learn better and help it to stick more in your long-term memory. The contextual interference I was getting from the metronome was not just playing with the metronome, but this is a little bit different tempo than I'm used to. So I don't know if anybody noticed, but the first 2 times that I played this, I started a little bit faster than the metronome and had to settle in because this is a little different. So playing things at a different tempo than you normally play them is also a great way to get a little bit more mentally engaged as you're playing. I'm going to go through at least one more. This number 3 one is one of my favorites. This is changing up the note grouping. So right now the groupings are very easy and logical to group them the way it's beamed. Kind of 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. But what if we shifted that over? Instead of doing 1, 2, 3, we did 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. Another way you could think about this is lead to here, lead to here, lead to here. So you're leading to the click of the metronome. If you struggle with playing with the metronome, this could also be very helpful to think about those upbeats leading forward to the downbeats. So let's try it. And it's not going to sound any different. It's going to be an even rhythm, but in our head, instead of 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, we're going to do 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. I'll kind of over-exaggerate it with my playing. You don't have to over-exaggerate it, but you can if you want. But just so you can kind of hear what I mean. So let's try that. Thinking 2, 3, 1 groupings. 2, ready. So hopefully that made you think about it a little bit differently. You got a little bit of that desirable difficulty, and now we're learning things, which is the beauty of warm-ups. Even in a warm-up, we can be learning things and developing our fundamentals. This fourth one is pretty straightforward. Just play it as written, but really focus on the counting in your head, and start with however you would normally count this rhythm in 6/8, but then maybe try counting it in a different way. So the way that I teach counting 6/8 is 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and. So you could try that, or you could do 1 lolly, 2 lolly, or do da dee, whatever you want to come up with, but just changing the counting that you're thinking of will get that desirable difficulty and mental engagement. I put a whole bunch of other contextual interference ideas that we won't go through all of them, but you're welcome to try these. And I will give you the other hint too. These aren't just great for technique warm-up exercises. These are fantastic for technical passages in your music as well. So you can try all of these different things, fingering along with the metronome. I think all of these are pretty straightforward, except for the second one, which I'll demonstrate a little bit. So this is where you play just the first note of each beat, but finger the other notes. So on this exercise, it would go like this, and I'll stand up so you can see my fingerings really clearly. So I'm fingering all the notes still, but I'm only playing the downbeats. And then if you want to make it harder for yourself, you can shift that over and only play the second note of each beat, or only play the third note of each beat while still fingering through all the others. And if you do something and you're like, oh, I don't know how I do that, that'd be so hard, that's good. That's the point of contextual interference. Now moving on to last but not least, we have articulation, the third step of our warm-up. This one is all about independence to the tongue motion. I have this really great long tone articulation exercise that I was anticipating we might run out of time for, so I have a video on my YouTube channel, the Quick Start Clarinet YouTube channel, so you can watch the video of it another time to get the long tone articulation exercise. But basically what you do is you play a high C and then wiggle your tongue around in your mouth, and you're going to get all kinds of crazy sounds like this. And as you're wiggling that tongue around, you're going to find what sounds good, what doesn't sound good. And then eventually, as you continue experimenting, you can start kind of touching the tongue to the reed, and then that will gradually turn into articulation. I'll leave that video so you can watch that. But I do want to do a little bit of the burst articulation to wrap up here. This one is a great exercise for articulation speed, but I also want to use it as an opportunity to talk about kind of getting creative with your warm-up. So you could just play this as written and go through the motions. You can do all the contextual interference stuff, which is great, but you can also just make new exercises out of what you have in front of you. So one of the things I did recently on this that was really fun for this exercise was, instead of playing just the repeated notes, which get kind of boring and tedious, what if we just make a little scale out of it? So you could go up and down, you could go just straight up through all of the notes, whatever works for you. So I'll demonstrate the kind of going straight up the scale, and we'll leave the metronome at 72. So it's nice and comfortable for now. You can of course push your comfort zone with this kind of exercise as well, but really pay attention to the quality of the sound on the long tones, and then keeping it on the articulated notes, which would go something like this. 2, 3. So you can see how, instead of just a straight articulation exercise, now there's a little finger coordination, getting the tongue and fingers coordinated. And you can do this with any warm-up exercise. Get creative with it. The notes that you play don't matter. What matters is, on long tones, you focus on sound quality, free from rhythm pressure. On technique exercises, you get good finger wiggling with great rhythmic precision so your fingers know when to move. And then on articulation exercises, you move the tongue independently to have really good quality of sound, even as you're shaping the notes with your tongue. And last but not least, all of these exercises, or most of these exercises, come from the Next Generation Clarinet Method, which is my method book, and you can go to that link, quickstartclarinet.com/test drive, to check it out and learn more about it, and test drive it for yourself to get an idea of how the whole program works if you're wanting more warm-ups. But that is my time, so thanks again, Jessica, so much for having me. Thanks so much to the ICA. Everybody donate, because the ICA is a great organization, and yes, I'm technically part of it as the co-chair of the enthusiasts, but even as a member, I adore what the ICA is doing. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much.